Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Backus.
And I'm Kevin Paulin, and welcome to the Falling Up Podcast, where we have conversations about turning obstacles into opportunities. And on today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by Duncan Markovich.
Duncan is the co-founder and owner of Better Ways LLC. He's an advocate and activist for the cannabis industry. And we had Duncan on in one of our early episodes. I think it was probably like episode 4 or 5. We had a really great conversation kind of talking about some of breaking down what cannabis is, a lot of myths around cannabis, a lot of education around safe use, safe practices. So if you guys are interested in that information, please go check out that previous episode. In this episode, what we really focused on was a lot of the background information, behind the scenes information, I should say, of what's going on in the cannabis industry in the state of Connecticut. About 10 days prior to recording this episode, recreational cannabis sales opened in Connecticut. So we thought it was a really good time to have Duncan on just to kind of talk about what he's been up to with his shop, and also just what's been going on in the cannabis industry in general.
So without further ado, welcome to the Falling Up Podcast.
We diving in?
Yeah, that's it.
Sure.
The only way that's the only way I know.
So,
Part two.
And I would say a fair amount has changed in the cannabis industry over the past 9 months or 10 months since we last had you on. So I think this is a really just good timing with recreational cannabis really coming into effect last week. So if for those listening, we're recording this like the second or third week of January 2023 in Connecticut. All of the, I guess, medicinal dispensaries are now open to recreational for the main part. 9 of the, I would say 15 or 16 of them have, they put their $1 million hybrid conversion, paperwork through. So because they were existing already, they didn't have to deal with the recreational lottery at all. Peppered around the state, including here in Brantford at Blue Point, rec sales have begun. This would be the second week. Mm-hmm. So I think it was or is really nice to be able to have you on for a variety of reasons. One, we were kind of talking before and just thinking of like, okay, anytime something new happens, there's always misinformation. And to try, I think I come from the standpoint, in anything we talk about, and any guest we have on it, it's all about the education piece, right? I don't look at things as good, bad, or indifferent, but being able to give people as much information to be able to make informed decisions. And when it comes to any psychoactive drugs, to first and foremost be responsible, right? Because there's so many issues, whether it's with alcohol, whether it's with opiates, whether it's with cannabis. So much of it can be preventable just by having good information, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So
sugar, food,
literally anything.
Yeah.
It's more of an attitude to life,
right?
Correct.
And absolutely. So I am happy to continue to be in this, place here on Main Street to keep educating the community. That's what Paul and I first and foremost wanted to focus on. And it's been really helpful. The pandemic was tricky. They definitely don't talk about a global pandemic hitting, anything. So that was fun to figure out. And since then, it's nothing's really changed. Education about the endocannabinoid system, the benefits of cannabis, the cautions of cannabis, good sourcing, quality products that work, affordability, and trust. It all just blends into trust. And again, it takes a lot of people sometimes to walk through that door just to say, hey, what's this place all about? We see CBD, nootropics, gut health on your window. Your signage on the sidewalk talks about ratioed cannabis products. What's that all about? So again, it's bringing this plant-based medicine and products into the public in a a professional way, I would say. It has its place as medicine, ultimately. But at the same time, there is sort of that social, recreational vibe, bringing people together, arts, music, fashion, ideas, cuisine, all of it. This plant touches everything.
Yeah, and I think you can argue that the recreational piece can also be a medicinal piece, right? Because I think community is such a vital part of life and wellness. And with anything, building connection around specific things opens the door for that. But can we touch on, I guess, the medicinal versus recreational piece? Because now, with it becoming quote unquote legal and recreational, I think that automatically creates these two avenues where, hey, you have medicinal patients, but now you have recreational clients or consumers. And just, can you kind of, is this making sense where I'm going? Like,
Absolutely.
How does that survive?
There is a distinction too, that the state has made between the medical and the recreational program, and that's THC limit caps. I believe Vermont had tried to run this. It's not working. They're repealing it, I believe, and again, it's like saying, okay, at least I'll talk about Connecticut, and here it's up to 30%, and the state's saying, past 30%, then those cannabinoid levels are medicinal levels, and you have to enter the state medical program, and so on and so forth. And it's like the plant holistically is medicine. It's not just the cannabinoid levels. It's the terpene and the cannabinoid and the sourcing and who grew it and the stabilization of the genetics and the inputs. And was it clean water? Was it soil? Was it hydro? Was it sun grown, indoors? There's so much that goes into the cultivation of this plant, and the more meticulous and passionate people that they are, the better the quality of medicine is, starting at the plant material phase and then converting that into these manufactured products. Like, you really have to focus on the goodness and the intention of what you're putting into these products, because ultimately they go out to the public,
Right.
And they're expecting it to be medicine for them. And I guess there's sort of this distinction of recreational versus medicinal as, the activity itself. People may not have any issues in their life, and they just enjoy getting high. And that's what they consider recreational application. They're still getting all the medicinal benefits of the plant. I think everybody over 21, if CBD works for them, I think people should be using this like a multivitamin daily, every other day. The benefits are profound. And then for people who want higher THC cannabis products, absolutely. As we were talking about the opiate thing, that pivoted into, what was that, a few weeks ago with Walgreens and CVS making a multi-billion-dollar commitment to Connecticut because of the opiate and pharmaceutical abuse that occurred. So it's, again, awareness and education, and, proper dosing is always a thing. If you're new to cannabis or you could be seasoned to cannabis, but new to a different product, slow and low. You can always take more. It's hard to take less. And that's with anything, the responsibility that you're talking about.
Is there a reason, or what would you think the reason is, I should say, that recreation stops at 30%? Is there, why would the government put that cap?
There's a lot that probably goes into it. I would say the financial component for sure, sort of saying, if you want higher THC stuff, then you only have to work with us. And that's not how other states are rocking it. That's not how, I personally don't think it should be run that way. I've talked to a few of our legislators about that recently, just revamping the system and taking another hardened look at what was in play in last session and what's occurred with 56 licenses, 37,000 applications. Most of the First round of lottery licenses going to out-of-state business owners, existing millionaires over small business owners here that live in Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot to tease apart. The Social Equity Council is all over the place. There were multiple lawsuits against the Social Equity Council in the state of Connecticut for in-state applicants working with corporations to get their licensing, and they're like, why are you denying us? And they won. Some of them won. And that's great for Connecticut to have like in-state business people and residents, And so this is going to look like a lot of things. This is, I think, an accelerated look at how microbreweries started to really expand. You had your big, master breweries in the beginning, and then, small, homebrew people. Oh, this beer is amazing. Why can't you make more of it for your family and friends? And then all of a sudden, hey, maybe we have a business. So that, I think there just needs to be an open level playing field for people, small business owners alike, out-of-state people. I've met great cultivators in Maine and Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut and out west. And, so I think a lot of what the licensing criteria currently lacks is a meritocracy focus. Like, who are you in the cannabis industry? What do you know? What's your passion? Are you really good at growing organic flower? Awesome. We need more of that. Are you good at educating the community? Are you good at testing and making sure purity matches what the lab results say? It's a big industry, and a lot of people are needed. But a lot of good people are needed.
Right.
So,
right.
And that's the blend in any industry, I suppose. And eventually the chips will fall where they may.
Right.
Yeah, I would imagine it's hard to, anytime you have so much, I guess the word would be like you have this huge disparity, like it's a discrepancy in money, right? So to enter.
It's a big pay to play.
Well, yeah, because I'm just thinking it would almost be like trying to compete with the Walmarts of the world, right? In the sense where it's like,
and that's where a lot of the financial influence is coming from. Is like individuals or groups of money interests that don't have any experience in the industry. They just see the potential financial growth, and it dilutes. That financial injection dilutes the purity of what this plan is trying to do for the community.
Right.
It also makes it incredibly hard for it to operate as a meritocracy, right? Because there's no merit involved. It's just whoever has the biggest name and has the most resources is going to be where.
Right. And it ultimately comes down to who you know. But yeah, the financial backing and, we're, I would say, at least a decade or more so into the country going medical at some point. And we're seeing this trend of corporate cannabis and regulatory capture, and it's kind of like locusts. It's like, all right, new state's medical, and then corporate cannabis floods that state with lobbyists and political influence money, and they do their thing, and then when licensing comes up, they're the first ones to get it, and then rec comes, and then they're already dominating the industry. But at this point, I mean, we've seen it already. So Curaleaf, which was originally a Connecticut created brand, was bought by this Russian, Boris, and last week it came, leaked documents that Curaleaf is Russian owned and Ukrainian owned, and America owns them millions of dollars. We empowered the Russians with like one of the biggest cannabis licenses in the world.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot going on. So here in Connecticut, globally, at the national level, like we're in a really interesting time right now in the cannabis industry. And again, it goes back to this financial backing and transparency and where's this money coming from and who are the backers and what are their intentions,
So what are some of the things to be wary of a consumer knowing kind of what we're talking about, how this is so politicized, and just in terms of products?
I mean, do your research. The internet's very helpful, but at the same time, if you have questions, like go to that brick and mortar.
Yeah.
If they're not a brick and mortar, contact the company. Have a phone call with an employee. Make sure they even sound knowledgeable. Ask for the COAs, certificates of analysis. Right now, I would only recommend American made. Stuff in Canada too. They've been federally legal for a little while ahead of us. I personally haven't done much research what's going on over in Europe, in Asia, in other parts of the world. I'm sure there are great cannabis products out there. But right now I can just, my scope is just sort of like what's going on here, and nationally. So hopefully federal legalization's around the corner, or at least it gets descheduled.
Right.
There is that sort of seesaw about, it's legalized, and then FDA regulation and that whole, ball of wax.
So with it,
Yeah.
and for those listening that may be confused in terms of scheduling, so right now there's, I believe, 5 classifications of drugs based on what is perceived to be potential for addiction and also therapeutic benefit. And a Schedule 1 drug, they say, is high likelihood for addiction with no medicinal benefit, and that's currently what cannabis is scheduled as. And what that does on a practical level, right, is it makes it pretty challenging to do any, and they've been able to do it because I think of how mainstream it's been over the past 20 years-ish, but it's really created... Go ahead.
It's the narrative that they've sold everyone that's kind of was folded into reefer madness. The government owns a patent that says it has medicinal value. And yet that's what they, in a legislative capacity, still hold true with it being scheduled. So it needs to be descheduled completely and looked at as more of like a farm crop.
Well, and then it also
like or like an herb, a medicine.
Right.
It is a medicinal herb. So why are we not? Why is the country not looking at it that way?
And in doing so as well, then it actually creates better research, better development, so many things that will allow for most effective and efficient use, and beneficial overall.
Yeah.
So but going back to the idea, I'm curious because we were talking at one point and you had talked about just understanding how the plant is grown, and making sure it is safe and not damaging. Can you speak to that a little bit, just so?
Absolutely. So on the other side of the certificates of analysis are hopefully included in, a more detailed report of the plant, especially if it's plant material. You're also going to have your levels of mold, bacteria, heavy metals, water purity, moisture content, things like that. High moisture content in cannabis when you first receive it or when it's tested usually means it's not cured correctly or fully all the way in haste, and it's more likely to lead to unsafe levels of mold on the back end, especially if it's not packaged correctly. Again, I think good cannabis is more like small batch bourbon. Like, you just take your time with it and let it do its thing, instead of what we're starting to see with these larger companies is not respecting the botany limits of the plant, growing cannabis in a way that encourages unsafe levels of mold, bacteria, powdery mildew, aphids, all sorts of things that don't belong there. And then that leads into the other current unsafe practices in cannabis with remediation tactics. So let's say it would be like, let's say we had a farm stand together and we grew some tomatoes and 3 of the 50 had mold on them. Well, we polish those up just the same and, make them look nice and good and sell it at premium and say, oh yeah, this is fine. So what's occurring now is with these remediation tactics is if you get moldy cannabis or the powdery mildew or any of these things you don't want on the product, they're allowed to microwave it and irradiate it or soak it in ozone. So
Really?
it is likely, and myself included, because I've been to dispensaries in Mass, in some outfits, if you've had cannabis in Connecticut or Massachusetts in the last 2 years, it's been remediated. You know it's super dry. There's not much of a smell to it. You touch it, it just crumbles. Again, it's these big businesses. Again, it's like corporate metrics. It's like how that business model operates. They're beholden to their shareholders. Right. Community, cannabis, or the legacy market, or everywhere in between. We're beholden to our patients and our community. We just want to make sure the best medicine is available at all times. And I'm not saying that there's not room for improvement. I would love to see, with that capital and infrastructure, I just, like, everyone has the space for improvement. I just wish that right now that, more education about what was really actually going on behind the scenes was more available. And thankfully, a lot of our legislators are starting to listen. And, a great cannabis bill was just released. I know more on the pipeline, to address what's sort of the inadequacies that we've, seen. And they always say the proof is in the pudding. Well, the sales numbers for Connecticut are abysmally low. And again, it's just it's the quality. And people are understanding that, like, support your local farmer. And some of them are. But ultimately, everyone should be growing their own tomatoes.
Right.
And that thankfully happens this coming July. Everybody over the age of 21 will be able to grow indoors. 6 total plants, 3 in a vegetative state, 3 in a flowering state. And you could, in theory, keep that going like with a perma harvest. You could have 1 plant ready every several weeks and just keep it sort of cycling. We have a lot of great local resources here for cultivation, whether you want to learn hydro or soil, or there's a lot of HTGs down in Orange. Local Brantford, Tyler Haas, he and a few other people have it's called Deepwater Consultations. They have a space in Guilford. They're doing like hydro consulting, which is really great too. That's another effective way to use a small space and grow really clean and healthy meds for yourself. So again, as this continues to roll out and unravel, you just want to make sure that the people you're working with know what they're talking about, because at the end of the day, I want to make sure somebody has the best experience with their cannabis that I'm having with mine.
So the remediate process that these larger cannabis companies are doing is there's no transparency? Like, as a consumer, I don't really know what they're doing.
So, they're not gonna tell you,
right?
But through Freedom of Information Act requests or things like that, people can get these test results and then analyze and look at them. And so that's what happened last year. We brought this to the attention of Michelle Siegel, the head of the DCP, Lamont, Attorney General Wong, legislators, and we said, hey, like 10 to the 4th colony forming units of mold or bacteria is like, we have pulmonologists saying that's not okay. We have the head of MCR labs saying that's not okay. It's approaching dangerous, unknown territories. And because it's not federally legal and or regulated, it's up to each state to do what they want to do. And, so it's just like, so when we brought this to their attention, they're like, okay. And then they held a meeting, and then they voted and increased the allowable limits of mold and bacteria in the medical marijuana program. And that passed in July.
Wow.
So it's kind of like, that is telling. not just to the community, but should be to the public at large, of sort of who's, what these intentions are. It's like big pharma.
It is big pharma.
And they're trying, and we've
Right.
allowed 4 companies in Connecticut to operate at least 6 years or more. It's created this monopoly over time.
And this is the ignorance is bliss, right? Because this can only happen because the vast majority, and when I say vast majority, I would say in this 99+%, right? I like to think that I'm relatively in the know when it comes to these things. And before talking to you like a week ago, this was the first I heard about this specific thing, right? So
Right.
it creates a massive problem when there isn't transparent communication.
Right. Transparency is
And
key.
transparent communication and reputable messengers, right? Which is, it's very hard in this industry. And I think part of it too, and just reflecting back, how many people could just arbitrarily do something and just be like, oh, this is now what I'm doing, with no oversight and kind of talking out of their ass. And then you have someone like you who has literally done everything as transparently and above board, really trying to preach education and get out there in the community. And that must be so frustrating to see.
It can be frustrating, but at the same time, you just can't let it distract you from, like, you just, lead by example.
Right.
LBE. So and now going back to, it's not doom and gloom anymore with just 4 companies. Thankfully, with the recent lottery round, there are local Connecticut residents that did receive licenses. And so, I am rooting for them. I'm rooting for them to set a different standard in the state and really crank it for the fences. And I know a lot of them are capable of it, and that's what they've been driving towards. And it's been a difficult road to get there. There's no linear path to this. There's sort of, there's a bit of a pattern path, but this industry changes 3 times faster than anything I've ever seen. And, it's almost daily. And then the politics and the bureaucracy and the money and people and brands and jockeying for position and stuff, that just puts it into spin cycle.
Right.
So, now we're starting to see, other operations, start. So it'll be a few months for the first licensed cultivators to get their first crops in, and then the new dispensaries will be up and rolling by then, and then come July, everyone gets to grow for themselves.
So what do you think that impact will be?
Empowering the community for more information on plant-based medicine. This is thousands of years old of agrarian practices that we just left with, the modernization, the Industrial Revolution, the, switch from the 17 into the 1800s, all of that. And then that mindset flipped into medical. So we're, the other exciting thing is Connecticut now has a psilocybin research task force. That was something that State Rep Robin Comey and I had talked about right before the election. She was gracious enough to come in and talk a little bit about what she's focusing on this session. We talked a little bit about cannabis, but she did mention the psilocybin component as well. And again, that's plant-based medicine that we've relied on for, thousands of years as well. So I think between cannabis and some of these other, natural substances, that with the right protocol and education and dosage and understanding, people are going to have miraculous moments of healing physically and mentally in the next decade.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it seems intuitively drugs like psilocybin, MDMA can have these breakthrough episodes. The one thing that I think is hard, and I try not to do, is be like, oh, it's this magical cure, because as you mentioned, it's it's a procedural process, right?
Yes.
And it's not like, hey, I take this medication and all of a sudden my world changes. It might create the avenue and the awareness and the consciousness of things that have been so kind of suppressed over years and years or defended against, but that is in conjunction with, actual therapeutic modalities and individuals who can help lead the way.
Right.
So I just like to touch on that piece, because I do think at times it can almost be like this magical cure. And I can see how it can feel like that, but I like to
Magical
just be
ride.
right. And it's also
It can be if there's if the volume is increased, but but again, like Paul's statements, you have decades of like clinical research of people within their field specialties on this stuff. Now it's gathering a little bit more momentum. I mean, if you have Netflix, definitely check out Fantastic Fungi. Like, it's just a really great documentary.
is that Michael Pollan?
No, that's Paul Stamets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's again, it's I think they talk about physiologically how we evolved, and it was sort of like during the hunter-gatherer phase. It's like, you had your tribe, and you're gathering plants and vegetables and fruits and stuff, and then it's like, okay, somebody eats that, they're okay. Somebody eats that, they're okay. Somebody eats that, they die. Somebody eats that, they have a different experience. So I do believe there was at some component interaction with fungi that caused our brains to like really explode in an evolutionary component with functionality, consciousness, awareness, just sort of that next evolutionary step, whenever that was. But that completely makes sense. And then you look at using, I mean, it doesn't even have to be psilocybin. It could be chaga, reishi, lion's mane, all of these other highly medicinal mushrooms that don't have any psychotropic effects. But the interesting thing is the serotonin and dopamine balance that it helps create naturally. And then what's even more interesting that I kind of found out recently was the life cycle on the surface of the brain with dendrites and how that all works out. So when you do microdose, in one of those controlled protocols, the dendrite life cycle is made healthier, and that has to do with like interactivity between the brain, cross correlation, the lobes, the corpus callosum, everything. So, as especially in your field with psychiatry and psychology and talk therapy and everything else that you work with. This is a great new era for medicine and neurology and mental health. And
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting, because I think just, again, intuitively it makes sense that what could take potentially years in talk therapy to get to, right, kind of the underlying core, whether it's trauma or schema or whatever it may be, can probably be blasted through in a relatively short period of time, which is really, really exciting. With that said, I just, with everything, to do it in a way that doesn't create doesn't misrepresent what's really happening, right? Because I think so many times in life, and you see it whether it's with different types of antidepressant medication or things like this, like, hey, I have this new experience, I begin to feel good, and then I completely overlook all of the actions that I'm taking that allow me to feel good. And then I just feel good, and I say, oh, this is because of this, 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 and then I stop doing those actions, then all of a sudden I feel like shit again, and I'm like, oh, well, this doesn't work, right? So I worry that process can be overlooked of, like, at the end of the day, you can take every medication in the world. If your actions don't match that of someone who is doing something to gain self-esteem, to create purpose and fulfillment, it's like, it's only going to last so long.
Right.
And then it can actually be detrimental because, again, you discredit everything that you're doing, essentially, right? I'm hoping that idea makes sense.
No, it does. It goes from becoming a tool, again, another tool of balance in the toolbox, into something that presents as an obstacle and actually hinders you and hurts those around you. Right. And then, that could certainly be with anything.
And then the other piece that I'm always remiss to talk about anytime this comes up is, like, there are objectively going to be individuals who are, whether it's predisposed to psychotic disorders or just don't have the right
mental chemistry.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's where it gets challenging just in the times, especially with young people and working and seeing people actively in drug-induced psychosis. And it's like, oh shit, this is not a game. This is not a game.
It's not. And that's why sourcing with cannabis products is so tantamount, because there can be an overlap, with street drugs and cannabis. And, thankfully it's few and far between, but with a drug-induced psychosis, it's usually onset from other harder substances, but it can happen with cannabis if that individual does have a preset baseline for. I mean, even I deal with it here every day. People come in, I ask them if they've had any experiences with cannabis, and they say, yeah, it made me really anxious, but they already have a baseline of anxiety. So a cannabis product with no THC that doesn't overload the CB1 receptor, that doesn't trigger an anxiety attack, even with a little amount of application, that's a more appropriate product for them. So for people with psychosis, I have worked with a few people with, at the direction of their clinician to help with schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, sort of helping people with that anxiety and paranoia in the middle of the psychosis with, broad spectrum products. But again, it's, this is all pretty new.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that your education and quality of products matches the expertise and in-depth level of education of, a medical professional. You have to, they may not fully understand it yet. Try and break down the chemistry to them as quickly as possible, but this is new to them. They don't go over the endocannabinoid system in medical school, because up until recently there was no cannabinoid products available for them to use.
Right.
So why even talk about the system if you can't even tap into it? Which I still think is ridiculous. But at least there's knowing and knowing not.
Right.
So that's, I don't know, I think that's a disservice, and the medical community needs to step its game up.
100%. I wanted to take a step back to the. I know you mentioned it a couple times, the recreation lottery. And if you could just go into detail about what that is, what that looked like for.
Sure. Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah.
So there are 8 different types of licenses: dispensary, cultivation, microcultivation, packaging and labeling, transport, extraction, food and beverage. There's one more on there. But so out of those 8 licenses for a regular lottery applicant, it was $500 a pop. And that application did not transfer into the next lottery round. For the social equity applicants, it was $250 per application. And it was an uncapped lottery structure, meaning if I'm a corporate cannabis company and I have $500,000 in my marketing budget, I'm going to dump all of that into the applications to secure 2,000 applications.
Wow.
So that's what happened. A lot of big money from out of state occurred. There's tons of articles about it. Currently, as more information came to light, and transparency, Ben, as you say. And it just was heartbreaking, to see our government, vote to increase the limits was just like such a smack to the face. But then to just see where these licenses went in certain instances, and just how they really stack the cards against small business owners. Over 36,000 applications for 50 some odd licenses, and the state made $15 million to say no.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm. And where does that money go? Does that go into cannabis education? Does that go into mental health institutions and education? Does that go into better testing facilities for our state's cannabis products? There's only one. There's only one.
I was gonna ask you about that too.
Well, thankfully, there's soon to be more because the ancillary services, the testing, and the grow technology, the living soil, there's a lot to this. So again, it's like who is and isn't aware of all this, and how this was getting set up in the back end, and us realizing like this is ridiculous, and if like we don't talk about this and we don't stand up to this and we just say no, it'll continue, and more people will continue potentially being exposed to like unsafe meds, and mold balls are a thing. If let's say an older cannabis patient who has chronic pain loves smoking flower and they smoke 3 times a day, but the majority of that cannabis has mold in it, the sort of long-term exposure to those products could potentially lead to mold balls, in which the mold self-perpetuates in your lung, and then you're really, really in trouble. And so we want to make sure there's more awareness about this. We want to make sure there's no public safety issues that happen. But unfortunately, there already have been. There was an employee in Holyoke, Mass. For a corporate cannabis company. Her name was Lorna, and she was in a pre-roll room packing them. And she went to her colleagues and said she was having a hard time breathing, and there wasn't proper ventilation, and her rebreather wasn't working or something. And basically it was like, finish your shift or you're out of a job. And so she went back to work, and then she went home. She still wasn't feeling well. She went to the hospital, and the next day she was dead.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not like cannabis, again, that wasn't from her smoking it. That was just the
mold.
the fine plant material in the pre-roll room. Think of like carpentry. Think of like all that sawdust in the room.
Got you.
Yep.
Got you.
So like that. So no, it wasn't because of mold, but it just, again, it's just like they're beholden to their shareholders. So it's like volume and just get it out and get it. There were 2 local Connecticut cannabis employees that found a box of pre-rolls that were going out for shipment to the dispensaries. The packing machine had cracked the tubes, and there was plastic shards in the pre-rolls. And when they brought that to the attention of their management, they were fired.
Really?
They were like, "We can't let these out." And they said, "You put them out, or you're fired." And they quit.
Right.
And they were let go. So like, how? That's like saying, oh, that fish has worms in it. Like I can see them. I can see the worms on it. And then you're at the seafood department, and they're like, yeah, just get it out the door.
Right. Package it up.
It's right. Like I don't understand this.
Well, the ethics of it is
Right.
non-existent.
No, it's not. It's in the dispensaries as well, is like they don't have any Connecticut hemp or CBD products on their shelves. They source from out of state. But I had products from out of state. I had hemp flower from Oregon, and the Department of Consumer Protection came in here and told me I couldn't sell it. And and that actually ties into how the state reclassified hemp and CBD products when we legalized cannabis 2021. So they now, because Delta 8 was becoming a big thing, Delta 10, sort of all these Franken cannabis products, everyone's getting into the chemistry and stuff. And again, if a cannabis product gives its end user the feeling they're looking for, sure, it's medicinal. I think there's varying grades. That's why I really push for full spectrum or broad spectrum products. But so now the state looks at Delta 7 through 10 and then THCA levels. So they were correct. Some of the flower was a little over that level. and some of it wasn't, and that was to their astonishment as well. And that was an interesting experience. They were cordial, they were professional. They didn't, it wasn't a fine, it wasn't, they didn't confiscate it. They just said like, hey, more of a warning, So it could have gone many different ways, and I do appreciate the experience that I had. But at the same time, it just seems hypocritical. It's like, why is our own state not supporting the in-state cannabis industry that's already been here? Why aren't we on their shelves? Why aren't we, So it just, I think it is just, the money component and trying to have as many slices of the pie as possible. And if they just took a step back and realized, because this plant touches everything, there's a big enough table for everybody to eat, respectfully.
Yeah,
like respectfully, you don't get to control the whole show, because you did, and look where we are.
Right.
And it's not okay. And a lot of people are unhappy. And I think that, this plant embodies goodness and embodies healing, for people who have a real relationship with it. It helps foster personal growth and change and evolution, and healing mentally and physically and everywhere in between. And that's truly what this, I think, the community and the industry is about. And you see those people, and then you see the other actors who are, they're doing their own thing, or they want the clout, or it's only about their brand, or they want, market dominance, or this or that. It's like, no, like, just have good meds, right, and educate people how it works, and create good vibes. If you want to talk to me about other stuff, then keep on moving.
No doubt. Absolutely.
So I don't know, but like, I hope some of this has helped. Like you were saying, like a little bit more new information. So this is, now we have to be vocal. We have to look at Maine to Florida, the Eastern Corridor, the East Coast. Maine has a great caregiver program that they're just crushing it. Maine flower and concentrates are really on the up and up. So if you're up there, again, do your research. Who is a privately owned small mom and pop cannabis dispensary? Look at what brands they rock with. See if they're local. Right now, because it's not federally legal, a dispensary can only source from in-state. But hopefully that changes soon too. There's something called the SHIP Act, which is really exciting, which would allow home growers to directly mail their products to anyone in the U.S. Like, so let's say one of your friends moves out of state, and they grow fire, and you're like, but man, like, you're like, across the country, but you grow it out there, and like, how do I get it? This would allow that to, safely and successfully occur, with whatever, taxes and sales and, tariff systems that are undoubtedly going to get applied to it.
Right.
Yeah, it'd just be like buying alcohol and getting it shipped. Right. It's the same.
Yeah.
Essentially the same process.
Hopefully, you look at California, and that system's taxed every gate from the farmer to the dispensary. So if it moves from the farmer to an extractor, that's a tax. And if it moves from the extractor to a food manufacturer, that's a tax. And then from the food manufacturer to the dispensary, so on and so forth. So like, again, like, no state's doing it completely right. And I really think we're at that threshold where whatever new legislation comes out, whether it's an emerging medical state or recreational state, oh my God, do your homework. Like, legislators or people crafting these bills, look at other states, what they did get right, what they didn't get right. Do not replicate it, and do not put it into your legalese. If it doesn't work elsewhere, why do you think it would work anyway, like in your state? Right. And that's, again, it's like the corporate lobbyists and the corporate, capital influence coming in and really steering a lot of the helm. But I think everyone's tired of this shipwreck.
Yeah. Well, how's that journey been for you? The advocacy and going to the legislature, going to the Capitol. I know you've done a lot of that.
The Capitol was interesting. I'd say like 12, 13 weeks between the beginning of March through, what would that be, June or so?
Yeah.
Beginning of June.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Rain or shine, in the cold, educating the Hartford populace about what was going on behind us in the Capitol legislatively, giving out food to the homeless, giving out free cannabis to everybody that was over 21. Yeah, we were checking IDs and making sure everyone was on par.
Mm-hmm.
Smoking with legislators on the Capitol lawn.
Nice.
Yeah. And then actually going in the bullpen where the lobbyist area is, inside the Capitol on the second floor. So you have the Democratic and Republican chambers, so the House or the Senate, they each have their own side. And then those doors would open, and then everybody kind of like congregates and walks around the bullpen, and then they head to the chamber floors, and that's where they're only allowed, or press or journalists. You have the state police there checking badges and stuff, but the public can interact with their legislators sort of in man, it kind of reminded me of Wall Street. Like when trades are going down, everyone, it's just chaos. Everyone's screaming at each other, throwing names out, throwing ideas out. Hey, listen to me. Oh, hey, it's good to see you. Oh, hey, well, you said you were going to do that for me. Well, you didn't do that for me. And like, it's like the high school playground almost, but just with adults. There's a lot of interesting things that go on up there. So if you really want to affect that kind of change, as always, reach out to your local legislator, have those conversations, discuss what is on their itinerary, see where their passions match with yours. That's where you can connect with them, and support them, and be vocal with what they're doing, and their colleagues. It is a give and take. And I think the conversations that happen within this industry, within the legislative side, and the those who are willing to speak to them and kind of get them educated, more of that needs to happen. Definitely in state, definitely nationally, because ultimately, if there's unclean cannabis out there, what are you doing? What are you doing it for?
Yeah.
It's obvious you're just doing it for the money.
Yeah, $50 million to say no.
But then again, it also takes the focus off the important factors, and it's what always seems to happen, right? Is like you have this pendulum swing one way, then all the way to the other, and then hopefully it balances out somewhere in the middle. But I think that's often what I find most frustrating is now, instead of talking about, like you said, the benefits, the community, the medicine, all of these really important factors, or even about safe use, right? Instead of talking about things that actually matter, it gets put to this almost arbitrary piece, and really it just shifts the focus off. That is just really unnecessary, I find.
It really is.
And I'm grateful to be able to have this conversation with you, and hopefully some other people will really be able to take some things away, because again, I had no idea that these were kind of the issues that now we're facing, right? Where if you think 5-10 years ago, the issues that we were facing in general, I mean, before 2012 or 13 or whatever, like you straight up get arrested if you had that.
Right. The medical program wasn't even established.
Right.
And now if you're 21 and over in the state of Connecticut, you can have 1.5 ounces on your person at all times, which is awesome.
But but things have moved in a positive, right? But
things have moved in a positive way, thankfully. Mm-hmm. And again, this is a multi-year conversation. I wouldn't say compromise, because then it's like, well, what are you giving up to gain? Like, you shouldn't have to give up anything when your focus is on healing,
right?
Because then you gain everything to help your community. So I don't really. It's a hard teleological breakdown at certain points with this. But yes, things have progressed, thankfully, and I the other sort of progression, which is interesting as I'm, as I'm looking at this Bahama Mama.
That's what that is?
Yeah, this is from my buddy over at Biocanna Group. This was a kingly gift he gave me when I saw him last. So thank you, by the way. This is great.
Yeah, shout out to him, Bahama Mama.
And so with the hemp and the CBD program, again, as they re-looked at those molecule structures, they also added a very cool clause about dry weight ratios with edibles and certain things. So now I can have a state compliant, federally compliant hemp product that does have a little bit more THC in it. So there are, other products coming in that capacity, with beverages and edibles and things like that. Here we have street nuts. That's like a candied nut assortment right here, actually. And so this brand, this is a Connecticut brand, and then the hemp is grown up at Sweet Heel, which is a farm outside Yukon. Oh. So, the cannabinoids that go into this, and then the recipe of, just the food itself, and the brand itself is also Connecticut. So, nice. It's having that local push, the hemp farmers and stuff. So that's sort of where I guess like the responsibility of the local CBD and hemp companies, we've, since there weren't brick and mortar places for the state to help us out with, we all kind of just like started fostering, our community and working together around the state where we could, whether it's a farmer or an extractor, a brick and mortar store, so to speak. So, again, as we're, so it was what, end of 2018, so 2019, yeah, we're coming up on 4 years here in Connecticut with the hemp market. Oh, that was another wild thing. One of the corporate lobbyists who was supposed to be working for Connecticut's hemp industry was also double dipping and working for a corporate cannabis company. And
yikes.
Yeah, so, no need to name names. Hopefully they're working on that. But I think the lobbying board hopefully has already been contacted about that.
Double dipping.
Like telling that corporate company what Connecticut was trying to do.
Right.
And then so they could get ahead of them, I guess. I don't know. It's not... again, it's the politics and the bureaucracy side of all of it, so it's tricky. I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm not trying to like say people are to blame or anything like that. But it's just like let's just keep going, and then let's just do it a little bit better.
No doubt. Did you see this a couple of last time on our show? Because that mold part, like, I have my medical marijuana card, and I go to Blue Point. Shout outs to them. And like Ben, actually today is my first day even knowing about mold even being a thing. So like that's it. Like I'm curious on how much mold I inhaled. If possible, I don't know, right? But I don't know. I guess my question is there any way that someone, especially at recreational users, now that they're going to dispensaries for the first time in Connecticut, is there things that they can look out for?
Talk to the dispensary technicians about what products are and are not remediated, and if they can't answer you, then I would say don't get those products. But again, like the remediation component, like, if it makes it inert, but again, it's like you're reducing the medicinal value of the flower by doing it,
right? Just
to say it like passed tests. So, you may not feel anything because of it. Somebody else might get sick. I'm not, again, I'm not trying to like cause alarm or anything, but, it's just people needing to be mindful of what is occurring.
Yeah.
So I hope you've had good experiences with those products. But the other thing is, like, now that it's rec, Connecticut runs the only sort of pharmacology structure in the country. So all the strain names are sort of, they're coded. And those strain names aren't being converted for rec. So people are just walking in and be like, oh yeah, I want Bahama Mama, and they're like, oh, you mean like Stradivarian 79 8-W blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, so if you are gonna delineate with THC caps, which again you shouldn't, because like, just don't, don't. Then keep the medical names for those strains if the people are in that program. But for the rec side, like, that's a part of the culture of it.
Right.
People are strain specific. They, whether it's one they've had or one that they've heard of that they want to try, they're not going to know how to do any of that. So why make it more complicated for the end user when they're trying to access their medicine?
Great point. Yeah, because at my first time in the dispenser, I'm like, the Hybridol,
right?
1782.
And do they tell you? Did they say, oh yeah, that's New York Diesel?
Some do, but it's like the ones that do are the ones that been there for a while. But someone new, they were like, Dab and Dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Shout out to Paul and Dab and Dad. That's what's up. Yeah.
Yeah, I rock with that, because if it wasn't for that though, I would not know most of them.
He'll be here. He'll be here Thursday for our paint party.
Oh yeah, paper right there. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That's another component of this, is like, how do you help create safe, friendly, professional experiences, for 21 up, for people who are interested in consuming cannabis. So we've had some successful paint parties here. We've worked with Christini, we worked with Home. Thursday, we're rocking out with Pearl, the wine bar next door.
Nice.
And that's sort of the vibe I want to foster and promote, is like the local restaurants, the local experiences, blending all of that for the community. And so we've had a lot of, really great experiences. I think my favorite one that was shared with me was somebody was like, I love this because it's always a pay-in sip. And for some people, they don't drink.
Right.
So they sometimes feel a little bit ostracized from that experience. And not to say that those aren't fun, and a great time and gathering for people. But, for people who might, be in AA or having difficult, or what's the other one? When you're a partner of...
Like Al-Anon?
Al-Anon, thank you. Yep. So just like that, like, maybe I can't consume it in support of my partner.
Right. Right.
So it does offer another unique experience for people. So I'm really, again, it just shows the many facets and avenues that this plant touches for people, and what it can provide.
That's dope. Yeah, I definitely got to come to one of them. I think Thursday.
Yeah, Sadie and I we'll figure out the next date. We're gonna try and maybe squeeze another one, and by the end of January. But
yeah,
everyone has their own schedules.
Yeah, I definitely want to come partake of that for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Well, as always, thoroughly enjoy this conversation. I know it can, at times, I think felt a little. Just a little down, but in the same breath, I think, to keep it in perspective of like, hey, the fact that we can even have this conversation,
yes,
the fact that, right, like you don't have to go back that far where literally you would have to be fearful of doing what you're doing right now, like be like, oh, is my future in jeopardy because of
right, yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
like, oh, I got to go into the woods 3 miles to even like open this bag.
Right.
So it's not. I don't want people to think it's doom and gloom. It's really not. Do your research, ask questions. If you don't know what questions to ask or go to your local, cannabis store or a friend or someone who seems knowledgeable. And then just have the conversations. But ultimately, we are on a good trajectory. It's going to take a little more earnest efforts to get there, I guess. And, it's all about expectation management. So with politics and bureaucracy, things are always slow moving, right?
Right.
So, you always want to focus on one or two things But if many people, from the community are working with the multitude of legislators on one or two things, then the whole picture gets seen.
Right.
And that I really hope is something that we continue to work for in this legislative session. Because it's just time. It's just time to take the next step and to evolve it the right way and just learn from other states' mistakes,
right.
But thankfully, I would say the individuals that are in you, obviously, did you get that announcement last October that you could start growing already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, it's empowering the plant to the people. And so if you can grow your own tomatoes,
why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just a weird coincidence that electrical rates are going up when home grow starts. And yet Massachusetts, you can grow your plants outside with no problem, as long as they can't be seen from the street.
Really? Okay.
12 plants a household.
Really?
Yeah.
Shit. Mass ain't too far now, baby.
No, it ain't.
No, that's what's up. I didn't know that. Yeah.
So with all of that, where can people find you? Where can they get your stuff?
So we are here on Main Street, 1122, downtown Brantford. You can go to betterwayscbd.com. We ship for free. We have a delivery route in the sort of the nearby towns of Brantford. And please follow our Instagram, Better Ways LLC, or follow us on Facebook, Better Ways LLC. Come down if you have questions, but also keep a lookout on social media, because I think Winning Ways and Better Ways are going to do some really interesting community-driven education, events and collaborating and continue to bring healing to our community.
100%.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Likewise.
So thank you both for coming. Again, also everything you do, or Libby, you guys are rocking and rolling with. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's really powerful stuff, and I'm so happy to see, in tandem with the podcast, that cohesion and everything. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
All right, guys.
The Falling Up Podcast.